Φίλες και φίλοι, γεια σας. Έχουμε την τιμή να έχουμε στο στούντιο του ΚΥΠΕ τον Αντιπρόεδρο της Ευρωπαϊκής Κεντρικής Τράπεζας, τον κύριο Λουίς Γκίντος, με τον οποίο θα μιλήσουμε για την πορεία της νομισματικής πολιτικής της Ευρωπαϊκής Κεντρικής Τράπεζας εν μέσω του υψηλού πληθωρισμού και τις συνέπειες στην οικονομία. Mr. Γκίντος, welcome.
Pleased to be here with you.
Okay, let me start by asking you about a comment by the ECB over the progress made by the Cyprus banking sector since the 2013 financial crisis.
No, that's totally real. I think that the progress made by the Cypriot economy and the banking industry here in Cyprus has been quite impressive. I remember, the times because I was finance minister of Spain in 2013, and I think that the situation now is totally different. I think that perhaps, a summary of this improvement is what, the rating agencies have recently done in terms of upgrading
to investment grade.
Yes, I think that this is very good news because normally, the first step is the sovereign, is, the Cypriot treasury, and afterwards, that improvement will start to extend to other parts of the economy. I think that even last night,
yes.
Some Cypriot banks,
Moody's rating
Cypriot banks were upgraded as well. So this is good news, and I think that is a clear reflection about the improvement of the economy and the improvement of the banking industry.
Well, let me ask you also one question over Cyprus's participation in the ECB Governing Council and Mr. Herodotou.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mr. Herodotou is a full member of the Governing Council. I think that he brings a lot of expertise because, he has expertise not only in monetary policy and financial stability and all these kind of discussions that we normally have, but I think that he brings, an angle that for us is very valuable, is that he knows perfectly how financial markets work, because he has experience, from, if you look at the curriculum vitae of Mr. Herodotou, it's quite clear that he has a lot of experience. And I think that this is a valuable experience. There are 26 of us, but whenever the governor of the Cypriot Central Bank speaks, we listen with a lot of care.
Great, thank you. Well, Mr. De Gindos, there has been an ongoing debate in Europe over taxing so-called windfall profits by the banks due to the rising rates. This discussion also touched Cyprus. What is the opinion of the ECB on that matter?
Well, we have produced several opinions on bank taxes, for instance, in the case of Lithuania, in the case of Spain, in the case of Italy. Not all the taxes are identical. They are differences. But our opinion is that this kind of levies, this kind of taxes, should not impair credit growth. That is very important in order to maintain a good performance of the economy. And secondly, should not have any sort of negative impact in the solvency of the banks. So these are the two main points that we normally make in our opinions, that are non-binding opinions at the end of the day. These are opinions that are, that have been designed and are meant, to help the countries and, the governments and the parliaments, to have a correct idea about the potential consequences of this kind of taxes.
I don't know whether is taxing banks, let's say, supportive of the monetary policy?
Well, if it impairs credit growth and the transmission of our monetary policy, then it's detrimental. But not all the taxes are identical. For instance, in the case of the most recent tax, that is, in Italy, they have been, they have modified, the initial version of the tax, and the initial proposal has not been the final one. And I think that the final one is much more sensible, in terms of the potential impact that could have in credit growth. But our point is that this kind of taxes should not have an impact on credit growth and on the transmission of monetary policy.
Okay, let's turn to monetary policy. Since July 22, the ECB has implied, let's say, a forceful strategy to contain inflation. You had 10 rate hikes, if I'm not mistaken, by 425 basis points.
That's right.
So, and I quote from the latest press release after the monetary policy meeting that the levels, if maintained for a sufficient long duration, will make a substantial contribution to the timely return of inflation to our target. I am very careful in picking up the words. So the question is here, do we have reached the peak of the plateau, if you will, of interest rates?
Well, we indicate very clearly, and we have publicly conveyed the message that we are data dependent, that it will depend on data. But I think that the paragraph that you have read from our monetary policy statement is quite clear. We believe that at the present level, if the present level is maintained for a period of time that is long enough, we believe that the present level of interest rates is going to make a very important contribution to achieve our price stability target, that is 2%. So we will see, there are always a huge level of uncertainty. Let's see what happens, for instance, with the price of oil that has been on the rise over the last weeks. This is an element that's an exogenous variable for us. But we believe that the present level is the correct one in order to try to meet our primary target, that is price stability.
Yeah, you highlighted one very important thing, the uncertainty in the current environment, because one development can affect the outlook.
Well, I think that we have, I referred to the price of oil. I think that the exchange rate of the euro is something that is quite relevant as well. We have seen a little bit of depreciation of the euro that could, in euro-denominated terms, could increase the price of energy in Europe. There is another variable that is the evolution, wage growth.
Wage growth, yeah.
Mm-hmm. These are because, the good news about, the European economy is that the labor market is having a very good performance. This is a very good news, and I think that this is a factor behind the good performance as well of the European economy. But simultaneously, we have started to see that wage growth is a little bit above 5%. Well, that could be, the consequence of workers trying to catch up with respect to the loss of real disposable income of the last 2 years. But this is something that we have to monitor closely because it could give rise to additional inflationary pressures. But the main message that we want to convey is the one that you have read. The present level, if maintained over time, we believe that is going to make a contribution.
If we try to, let's say, translate it further, this message shows that the present level will be maintained.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Therefore, we've reached a peak, given if nothing else happens.
I would not be as explicit as that, but what I would say is that the present level, because sometimes, I understand perfectly that people want to know whether, we are going to hike or we are going to reduce rates. Well, the present level that we have now, I think that, it could make, a very important contribution. We are stressing mainly, the duration of the level more than the level in itself.
The duration meaning that interest rates will remain high. It's the new normal, let's say.
What I think that it was not normal is the level that we had before.
Yeah.
Because we have some deflationary pressures in the European economy, and so to have negative interest rates was not normal. The real normality is to have
the current we are living.
Positive. No, I would not say the current, but to have positive, at least positive interest rates.
Exactly. Well, okay. The economy is slowing down. Business activity is slowing down. We've seen new loans dropping to historic lows since the inception of the ECB's banking lending survey. These are all results of the monetary policy. The question is it premature to talk or to even contemplate over rate cuts?
I think that is premature. We are not there. Inflation continues to be, we have reduced inflation. Well, inflation has dropped from more than 10% to the present level. That is a little bit more.
4.3, I think.
Yes, that's the headline inflation, and core inflation is very similar. No? So, we have seen an important reduction, but our definition of price stability is 2%, and we are not there. So this is something that we have to take into consideration. The other element that I would like to stress and to mention is the transmission of monetary policy. Transmission of monetary policy is a two-stage process. The first one is from our decisions, and when we hike, when we increase interest rates, to the banking system. The banking system is the main channel for the funding of the European economy. And we have seen that there, the transmission is complete. Whenever we hike rates, immediately, banks, they start to tighten financing conditions. And immediately, as you have indicated, there is a drop in the demand for credit. So, in that respect, this first stage, this first leg of our transmission mechanism, I think that is complete. The second one is something that we have to look at much more carefully, because it's how this tightening of financing conditions is transmitted to the economy, to the activity, and indirectly and eventually to inflation. And in that respect, well, that's why we are going to be data dependent, because there is a lot of uncertainty. And why there is a lot of uncertainty? There is a lot of uncertainty, first of all, because in the euro area we have countries with different situations. For instance, here in Cyprus, mortgages, as is the case of Spain, for instance, are normally granted at variable rates. In those countries, the transmission is much more rapid. There are other countries that fixed rates in mortgages, are much more relevant. So these are the kind of things that we have to look at very carefully, and that's why we say very clearly that we are going to be data dependent, because there is a heterogeneity of situations in the euro area, and we have to look for the overall euro area in terms of our monetary policy implementation.
Speaking of transmission of monetary policy decisions to the banks and then to the economy, there is a discussion that there has not been a sufficient pass-through of rising interest rates to deposit rates. And this discussion is ongoing also in Cyprus. What do you think about that?
Well, I think that when we increase interest rates for everything, for the asset side and the liability side of the banks, so for loans and for deposits. Even if normally, always the banks, they are much more rapid, increasing interest rates on loans. That's totally right. But I think that is very important, because normally, the transmission of monetary policy is not only about the tightening of financing conditions. If you increase the remuneration of deposits, immediately what you are doing, you are increasing, the attractiveness, how attractive deposits are for savers. And simultaneously, this is another factor behind, the purpose of the tightening of monetary policy. So, our position is quite clear. When we hike rates in all the expressions of interest rates, for loans and for deposits. And this is something that, we are going to look at very carefully.
Okay, including the remuneration of minimum reserves of the banks?
Well, that's totally different. That's a totally different situation, because this is part of our monetary policy, and this is, how we are implementing, our monetary policy. In the case of the minimum reserves, well, it's a requirement. So it's part of the monetary policy framework that we have in place. No?
Okay, and the last question is from the real economy perspective. People are, let's say, criticizing the ECB and the central banks all over the world that they hike interest rates, having no regard of the challenges both businesses and borrowers face in their monthly loan payments. What is your response, and what would be the alternative if there is?
Well, the alternative would be much worse. If we do nothing, the situation would be much worse. In what sense? First of all, inflation would be much higher. Secondly, we could have, the anchoring of inflation expectations that would have, a very detrimental impact to the evolution of the economy. And at the end of the day, we would have to tighten even more, much more than now. So, you know, the consequence of doing nothing would be, a recession and, an additional tightening of financing conditions in comparison with the situation that we have now. So, I know perfectly that when we increase interest rates, this is not popular. But this is the only way to deal with, the biggest evil that we have now in the economy, that is inflation. And, our mission is to reduce inflation. Inflation is not only bad because, people lose real disposable income and, purchasing power. It's bad because it has distributional effects. For instance, low-income people, they are the ones that are going to be much more affected because of inflation. First of all, because they consume 100% of their income, of their revenues, and secondly, because the kind of products whose prices have been rising the most are those that are normally, consumed by low-income people.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.